let's talk about notebook computers and portable devices. Now, notebook computers and portable devices are examples of what we call portable computers. Basically, they allow you to carry around a lightweight, battery-powered computer. There are several different types of mobile computing devices that you need to be familiar with. In addition to laptops and notebooks, there's another category that we sometimes don't associate with being a computer, but they really are. And that's the Personal Digital Assistant, or PDAs. PDAs have become very popular lately. Sometimes they call them palm-top computers or handheld computers. Because they really are computers, they just have reduced functionality. Now with a PDA, you don't have to use a keyboard. Instead, you use optical character recognition. If you've ever used a PDA, you know how this works. You have a little stylus, you write on the screen using a very specialized, defined way of writing. The processor inside the PDA interprets that and displays it on screen as a text character. In addition to PDAs, there's kind of a hybrid type of portable computer that's become very popular in the last 2 years or so, called a tablet PC. It really is. It's a hybrid between a notebook and a PDA. A tablet PC is a fully functional notebook PC. High-powered, got all the things that a traditional notebook has. However, they also have a screen that operates in a much the same manner as a PDA. Now, a tablet PC uses the Microsoft Windows XP Tablet PC Edition operating system, which is, by the way, is compatible with just about any Windows XP software. All of these different types of portable computers have some very distinct differences as compared with desktop systems. These computers are specially designed to, first of all, minimize or compensate for physical shock. Think about the way a hard disk works. We have our heads floating just microns above a spinning platter. Imagine what would happen if we were to drop that system, maybe from 2 or 3 feet, and that head were to dig down on top of that spinning platter. Not a good thing, right? It'd be like a lathe. You'd have a sprue of metal coming up off your hard drive, and your data's toast. Second is the actual physical size. With a desktop system, we're concerned about space utilization. We don't want to have things too big and bulky, but it isn't an overriding factor. With a notebook system, for example, it is a very serious consideration. We need things to be small, and we need them to be light. In addition to size, we also need to make sure that our components use less power. PC-based components, for example, an expansion card that goes in an expansion slot, there might be some power-saving components built into the card, but it's kind of like a secondary consideration. With a notebook system, it is a primary consideration. We don't want devices consuming power that they don't need. To make this possible, we use a new type of expansion bus, and that's called the Personal Computer Memory Card International Association Expansion Bus, or PCMCIA. The PCMCIA expansion bus uses credit card-sized expansion boards called PCMCIA cards. There's actually several different types. Let's take a look at them. I might point out that some folks call these PC cards as well. You hear PC card or PCMCIA, we're talking about the same thing. If you've ever used a notebook system, you've probably been exposed to PCMCIA cards. They look like a credit card, and they slide into a slot in the notebook system. They can provide a variety of different functions. You could be a USB adapter with a port here for USB cables. It could be a 1394 connector. It could be a wireless network board. All kinds of peripherals, such as those we associate with a traditional I/O bus on a desktop PC system, can be implemented with a PCMCIA card. There are several different types. The first type is the Type 1. The Type 1 cards are pretty much obsolete now. Type 1 cards were 3.4 inches by 2.1 inches, and they were about 3.3 millimeters thick. We don't see a whole lot of Type 1 cards anymore. What we do see, however, are a ton of Type 2 cards. Now, a Type 2 card has pretty much the same dimensions as a Type 1 card. The difference is that instead of being 3.3 millimeters thick, it's 5 millimeters thick. Most notebook systems today use Type 2 PCIMCA cards. In fact, most notebook systems have 2 Type 2 MCIA slots. In addition, there's a Type 3 PCMCIA card. You don't see a whole lot of Type 3 cards, but they are around. A Type 3 card has exactly the same dimensions of a Type 2, with the exception of the fact that it is 10 millimeters thick. It's quite a bit thicker. Its length and width are the same, just twice as thick. Basically what happens if you use a Type 3 card, you slide it in and it uses up both Type 2 slots in a notebook system, but actually has one connector inside. It's important to note here that PCMCIA standards are actually being replaced by a new standard called PCI Express or Express Card. Now, Express Card slots are connected directly to either the PCIe bus or to the USB bus. Express Card offers speeds up to 2.5 gigabits per second if you're connected to the PCIe bus, or up to 480 megabits per second if you're connected to the USB bus. Now, Express cards come in two different widths. Let's put width right here. Express card slots are either 34 millimeters wide or 54 millimeters wide. And therefore, we have two different Express card form factors to accommodate those two different slots. We have Express Card 34, which uses rectangular cards that are 34 millimeters wide. And an Express Card 34 card can actually be used in either the 34 millimeter slot or the 54 millimeter slot. We also have the Express Card 54 form for Express cards. Express Card 54 cards are L-shaped cards that are 34 millimeters wide to fit into the slot, but 54 millimeters wide on the outside edge. And these cards fit only into 54 millimeter slots. Now, when inserted into the appropriate slot, the Express cards will use either the PCI Express bus or the USB bus, depending upon how the system is configured. Express cards can be used for all different types of devices in much the same way that we used PCMCIA cards. In fact, an Express card can even be used to add a graphics card to your laptop to attach an external monitor. Now, many newer laptops have some, none, or both. They may have Express card slots, but no PCMCIA slots. Some will have both Express card slots and PCMCIA slots. Some laptops have no slots at all. They don't have Express card slots or PCMCIA slots. They assume that all external devices will connect through the USB port instead. In addition to size, another great consideration when we're dealing with notebook systems is power. We need to have a way to make the system truly portable. In other words, it needs to run on a battery. Let's take a look at the different power options we have with a notebook systems. Now, before we do that, you need to understand that a computer system, whether it's a desktop system or whether it's a notebook system, must have a power source that supplies a constant voltage. It can't taper off. Now, if you've ever used other consumer electronic devices, such as maybe a portable CD player, you know that the batteries do go bad and they lose voltage. Consider it a flashlight. If you fill up a flashlight full of batteries and you leave it on, what happens to the light over time? It gets weaker and weaker and weaker, right? Well, that won't work with a PC system. For a PC system to run, we have to have a constant power source that supplies a constant voltage. It cannot taper off. To do that, we have to use a special type of battery. There are 3 different types of batteries that are commonly used with PC systems. The first type is the nickel cadmium, or some people just call it the NiCad battery. This was the first type of battery that was used primarily in the older laptop type of portable computers. They worked pretty good, but NiCad batteries had some problems. First of all, they developed a memory. If you've ever had a device that used a NiCad battery, you know what I'm talking about. Let's say this represents our battery, okay? Up here is 100%, down here is 0%. With a NiCad battery, you had to be sure that you absolutely drained the battery every time you used it. If you used it for a while and say got it down to around the 50% mark, 50% capacity remaining, and then were to recharge it, and then were to do that over and over and over, constantly recharging it at 50%, over time, the battery would develop what's called a memory, meaning that it would discharge to the 50% mark and be out of juice. That would be it. In addition, NiCad batteries had a relatively short life. They just didn't last that long. And they were intolerant of high temperatures. If you got a NiCad battery too hot, they stopped working. Another problem with NiCad batteries is that they were really intolerant of being overcharged. If you overcharged them, you would damage them. I learned this the hard way with my very first laptop system back in the early 90s. Had no hard drive, just 2 floppy disks, and it had a NiCad battery. Well, I just assumed that if I plugged it in, that when it reached a certain voltage level, that there was a voltage regulator somewhere that would turn the current off so that the battery wouldn't overcharge. That was not the case. I plugged it in, I let it charge and charge and charge and charge, and it destroyed the battery. I went down from having about a 30-minute battery to about a 2-minute battery overnight because of that. In addition, NiCad batteries were made up of some really nasty materials. They are highly toxic, and it was hard to dispose of this type of battery. The second generation of notebook battery was called the nickel metal hydride battery. It was a great improvement over the NiCad battery. First of all, it could last about 40% longer as compared to a NiCad battery. In addition, it held a greater charge capacity than a NiCad battery. They tended to not develop this memory problem that NiCads were famous for. If you overcharged it, it wouldn't stop working the way a NiCad did. In addition, the materials used in the nickel metal hydride batteries were less toxic than those used in a NiCad battery. You will probably still run into some notebook systems that still use a nickel metal hydride. The newest type of notebook battery, one that's really catching on, is called the lithium ion battery, or Li-ion. A lithium-ion battery has twice the capacity of a comparable NiCad battery. It doesn't have the problems with memory the way NiCads did. It can't be overcharged, and it isn't as susceptible to heat issues like NiCads were. The only problem with lithium-ion batteries, compared to nickel metal hydrides, they don't have as long a lifespan. Folks are always trying to find ways to maximize their battery power. There's a new type of power source. It's kind of in the experimental phases yet. I don't know of any production system yet that uses this, but if it works, it could totally revolutionize the way we use portable computers, and that's called the fuel cell. Now, it's a newer power source. It's not implemented yet, but it doesn't use an actual battery. Instead of a battery, a fuel cell uses methanol. Now, the theory behind a fuel cell is that it converts hydrogen and oxygen into water, thereby generating DC current in the process. Now, oxygen's not a problem. We've got plenty of oxygen in our atmosphere, right? Raw hydrogen, on the other hand, is a big problem. Raw hydrogen is hard to come by. It's very explosive. It's hard to store. We don't necessarily want to be packing around a hydrogen tank on our laptop, our notebook systems, right? In order to use a fuel cell with a notebook system, we use a device called a reformer. And the reformer's job is to take methanol and split it into hydrogen for use in the fuel cell. Now, when we do this, the fuel cell can deliver an average of about 14 watts of power at 12 volts for about 5 hours. I've heard some folks tout fuel cells for notebook systems that will have maybe up to 12 or 14 hours as well. That is much longer than a traditional battery. A traditional battery, if you've got maybe 45 minutes to an hour out of it, you did really well. Lower end batteries only give you about 15 to 20 minutes. So there's a big difference in the amount of output between a regular battery and a fuel cell. Fuel cells aren't without their problems. The biggest problem with a fuel cell right now is its size. The fuel cell is way too big to fit inside the PC the way that a battery does. So we have to use an external unit that weighs over 30 ounces and is about 120 cubic inches in size. That's where we store our methanol and the devices that convert it into hydrogen and oxygen and then combine that into water to produce our current. If that takes off, I think we're in good shape. It won't be long. If this is really the right way to go, we'll see fuel cells that are small enough to actually fit inside our notebook system, and then we've got lots of time on our hands without having to worry about recharging. Before we end this lesson, we've got one more topic we need to talk about, and that is the notion of a docking station. Now, notebook systems in the past kind of had a reputation of being about one generation behind desktop systems. If you want a fast system, you really had to use a desktop system. Notebooks were about one step farther back as far as speed was concerned. That's not true anymore. Notebook systems now, many times, can compare very well with the desktop system. The fact that they're portable makes them very, very useful. So many users are switching completely to a notebook system instead of using a notebook system and a desktop system. To make this really functional, we need to use a device called a docking station. The problem with a notebook system on the desktop is the fact that we kind of got spoiled with our desktop systems. We're used to larger monitors. A good notebook system might have a 15-inch monitor. Well, in our desktops, we're used to 17 or 21 or even larger monitors. Keyboards is another issue. Try as we might to make notebook keyboards more ergonomically correct, they still just aren't as good as a good old-fashioned desktop keyboard. Same with a mouse. Folks over time get used to the pointing devices that are used on notebook systems, but they're still harder to use than a traditional regular old mouse. To provide this type of functionality, we use a docking station, which is sometimes also called a port replicator. With this type of device, we have this desktop unit that we slide our notebook system in, and it connects up, and it provides a connection for a larger monitor, for a larger keyboard, or for a larger mouse, and maybe even a wired network connection, among other things. It could provide other things as well, such as a DVD drive or whatever else it's been configured with. Now you might be saying, well, on my notebook system, I've got a mouse port on the back, I've got a monitor port on the back, I've got a keyboard port, I even got a wired network connection built in. What do I need a docking station for? The nice thing about a docking station is that slide in, slide out function. If you want to use it as a desktop system, you slide it into the docking station, you've got your desktop system. When you're ready to take the notebook home after work, you slide it out and it's all ready to go. If you use the built-in ports on the back of the notebook system, then when you want to connect to your desktop type system, you got to plug everything in, do the screws, plug the video port in, plug the mouse, plug the keyboard, plug the network in. Then when you're ready to go, you have to undo all the screws, unplug everything, and go. The docking station allows you to slide it in, turn it on, you're ready to go. When you're done, slide it out, and you're ready to go again.